All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday, December 22nd edition of the DRF Players Podcast, show number 199. This is also doubling as a handicapping session. We're going to be looking at the opening day races at Santa Anita, one of our favorite racetracks in America. Going to be a lot of fun. Another thing we're going to be doing during the course of this hour is previewing the Daily Racing Form Tournaments website, tournaments.drf.com. And everyone who attends this webinar is going to have an opportunity to play in a contest on Monday, December 26th, Boxing Day, where we're going to be giving away 10 $33 feeder seats so folks have a chance to win their way to the National Handicapping Championship, the NHC, happening in January. Chance to win your share of $2.5 million. So first I'm going to introduce our team, and then we'll make some points about this little contest that you all are eligible for having registered for this webinar. Going to bring in from the DRF offices in New York, at DRF Formulator himself. He also goes under the name at DRF Hogan, Mike Hogan. How are you today, Mike?
I'm doing great, Pete.
Excellent. And we have also coming in, the private plane has landed. He's back in Texas. He is 2015 NHC Tour champion, Jonathon Kinchen.
Yeah, there's a lot of days in racing that make me happy, but nothing I think more than the day after Christmas at beautiful Santa Anita Park.
Let me ask you this, Jonathon. Do you get more excited about Christmas Day or the day after Christmas, the opening day of Santa Anita Park?
I mean, I guess that if I was trying to seem like I was a better person than I am, I would take a long time to answer this question and be like, oh, I don't know. I really like Christmas. It's family and presents and celebration of life and happiness. But there's really no question. I definitely like the day after Christmas better.
Fantastic. Huge day of racing at Santa Anita when I was in England last year. Huge day of racing over there. Something like 6 or 8 race meets. They say if you're a jockey in the UK or Ireland and you can't get a mount on Boxing Day, your career's in a whole lot of trouble. But we'll be getting to that in a minute. We'll be getting to the whole card we'll be discussing. But first, I just want to make the point. If you have read whichever email, this is for the people who are watching the webinar live, whichever email you registered for the webinar with, that is the email that's going to receive an invitation to this tournament on Monday. So that means if the email you use to sign up for this webinar is different than the one that you have as your main email for DRF tournaments, you're going to want to essentially leave this webinar and come back with the correct email address. There are also many of you listening who are saying, but wait, I don't have a DRF tournaments account yet. That's okay. As soon as this webinar is over, I encourage you to go to tournaments.drf.com, follow the simple instructions to sign up. As long as you get that sign up done by about 3 o'clock today, Mike Hogan demonstrating right there how easy it is to do it. As long as you get that done by the end of the day today, should be no problem. You'll be invited to this tournament on Monday, which is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to helping some folks get their journey started onto this year's NHC. We're in this exclusive window of contests, NHC qualifying contests on the DRF tournament site. We will be running more in the new year. You can see the full roster of opportunities of upcoming contests on tournaments.drf.com, and we'll be talking about them more on the podcast. Now, if you're a podcast listener, and you're saying, oh, man, I didn't get a chance, I didn't sign up for the webinar, what about me? Don't worry. We'll have other opportunities like this in the future, and there are still so many low-cost opportunities on the DRF tournament site where you can start for as little, depends on the week, but many weeks it's $18. Some weeks it's even a lower barrier to entry to get involved in tournament play, see what's so great about it, and proceed from there. So that's how the tournament piece of this works.
Pete, make sure that you remind the guys that are listening. This is something I learned a couple years ago. Those little gift cards, those Visa gift cards that your grandmother gives you, those work for depositing into DRF tournaments. And I can promise
didn't realize. Oh, yeah, of course.
Any that I get, that's where I'll be spending my money. So thank you, Grandma, Grandpa. I appreciate it.
Give the gift of handicapping tournaments this Christmas. I love it. All right, so why don't we do a little bit of double duty here? Why don't we start talking about the Santa Anita card? The first two races are actually not going to be part of the contest. So those, we'll just talk about those races quickly. Then, when we get to race 3, the first race of this free contest on Monday, at that point, Jonathan, maybe you can demonstrate so folks can see exactly how easy the site is to use. I also want to underline the slide Mike has up on the screen. You can submit us questions. We're going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end of the show today to answer your questions. If we fail to do them in the allotted time, don't worry, we'll get to them later. You can hit us up on Twitter. I gave Mike's Twitter info before, at DRF Hogan. I'm at Looms Boldly, Jonathan at UT Big Hair, or if you need more characters, go ahead and send us an email, podcast@drf.com. We've got a little bit of a backlog of great questions, but the winter show's coming up. We're going to have plenty of opportunity to deal with questions, so feel free to do that. All right, without further ado, let's dive in to this first race at Santa Anita. We're going to kick off with a 6.5 furlong race on the dirt. Jonathan, first race of any meeting, are you inclined to get involved, or are you a little more inclined to sit back and watch?
No, that's like going downstairs and waiting an hour before you open your Christmas presents. Like when it starts, I'm going to participate. You know, obviously I'm not making the bet of the meet on the first day of the meet or anything like that, but I'll participate, especially out at Santa Anita where they have the wonderful player pick 5 with the low takeout. You have to get involved, in my opinion. It's the best bet that you can make there. So
who will you be using in the pick 5?
You know, that depends a little bit. First of all, you know, I want to say like one thing about Southern California, Gulfstream, New York. You know, you need to be accessing, you know, the Gulfstream clocker reports that Mike Welsh and Mike Vesey do such a great job with. There's some that are available for California as well, not through DRF, but it's something to consider. So that always is going to be impactful in some of the decisions that I make, especially at Santa Anita on opening day when they're coming back from a break. One of the horses I'm really interested in using in this situation, he'd be the type of horse I'd use in a tournament if this race was in the tournament, but one that I'll use as an A horse to kind of build around is Perfect Cocktail. If you notice, since Kinchen got on him, he kind of had that wide trip 2 back and then has come back running ever since. He's cutting back to 6.5. And I have found in some research I've done at Santa Anita that 6.5 is the most closer-friendly trip at Santa Anita. And so if I can get a horse that I think will be finishing, that's one that I feel comfortable leaning on.
Makes sense. Mike Hogan, anything to add about the first race?
No, I think the first race is it's actually a pretty wide open race, and if I were playing the pick 5, I'd probably want to be sure I used a number of them in here. The one that interests me a little bit from a pace standpoint is number 6, Chipino Pasadino, who you know, hasn't really gotten it done in his recent starts, but looked pretty good in the debut. May just be faster than the rest of them, at least based on the Moss pace figures.
All right, let's move on to the second race. I also want to point out Jonathan made reference to how his handicapping evolves. He sort of handicaps in stages, one of the last stages being the incorporation of clocker info. As his opinion evolves, it can change, obviously. And if that is the case, don't worry. You'll be able to hear his final opinions because he will be the guest on our friend Tom Quigley's simulcast show on Monday. What time do you go live with TQ, JK?
It is typically 60 minutes before the first post. So I don't know when first post is. TQ texts me, but I can't remember exactly what it is. But it's when the simulcast feed pops up. It usually shows 90 minutes to post, and then TQ's show starts 60 minutes to post. They show all the replays from the previous day of the meet of the week, which I'm guessing will be the final day of last meet. So yeah, it's always fun to be on with TQ.
That'll be great. So make sure to check JK out there. There may be some differences as he gets a little bit more information. But as of now, Jonathan, where do you stand with race 2 at Santa Anita on opening day?
Yeah, you know what's funny is we've talked about it on the podcast a few times that Del Mar pretty much all summer and a majority of the fall meet has favored horses on the outside. Which is not typical of Southern California racing. It can kind of be confusing and make it a little bit more of a challenge. Weirdly enough, the final day of the meet, I thought it was really, really heavy inside speed, and that's kind of why I'm interested in Sawbuck here. He was against it that day on the outside of the track, kind of close into that situation with not much pace to run into. So I'm going to give that one another shot in there, and I think he'll be a little bit more forward here, and so I'm going to build a lot around him. I would include Classic Ruler a little bit, and then when you're doing your handicapping, who do you think is going to be on the front? It's always important in some of these short baby races is who do you think is going to be forward. Some of them don't like the kickback, and some of them just don't have the class to finish pass horses, and so I always look for something that I think will be forwardly placed. I think Sawbuck will, but I'll be looking for some of the first-time starters as well to see if there's any hints that those horses might show some speed as well.
See those kind of hints in the Clocker report, see them potentially in the paddock. The money they take early, obviously, another indicator. And the fellow we mentioned before, Tom Quigley, at Quigley's_corner on Twitter, tweets his paddock thoughts as well. Another way to get a line on the Santa Anita 2-year-olds and first-time starters, something to think about as well. Mike Hogan, anything for you in this State-Bred Maiden 50?
I'm with Jonathon on Classic Ruler. I think that's one you have to use, and I think he'll be a somewhat of a fair price with somewhat low-profile connections. We don't have the morning lines out yet, but I would imagine number 7, Burnt Cognac, is probably going to take a lot of money dropping from maiden special weight for Richard Mandela. And I was curious, this kind of move for Mandela with 2-year-olds dropping in from maiden special weight into maiden claimer. Didn't seem like a move that Mandela does very often. He's actually done it only twice in the last 5 years, so this will be the first time. Both of them lost. They both ran pretty well, but were, of course, both short prices. So I expect something similar here. Burnt Cognac is one who I think will probably run well on the drop, but he's going to be probably a bit over bet. Just knowing the connections and knowing that class drop.
Possibly one to take on for Mike Hogan on the top spot at an expected short number. Let's move on to the first race of our contest. It will go as the third. It is another 2-year-old race. We've got maiden special weights here going 7 furlongs. Mike, why don't we start with you on this one if you had a horse you wanted to pass along?
I think number 2, So Conflated, is going to take a lot of money off of the nice debut, finishing third to American Anthem, who looks like he could be a very good one for Bob Baffert. The one, I think the buzz horse in here is number 9, Dabster, $1 million purchase in March as a 2-year-old in training, seemingly working quite well, 46-2 with the last work. I think he's going to be the buzz horse. I think he's going to take a ton of money if those workout reports that Jonathon mentioned are touting him. So he's one you certainly want to keep an eye on, and at a short price, he could very well be a very live runner if he takes a lot of money. The one that's interesting to me at a bit of a price is number 4, Law Abiding Citizen, who ran fairly well, a little bit of a middle move after a slow, steadied start, maybe needed the race, maybe moves forward off of it, has been gelded since and has a bullet work since. He's one that I wouldn't be surprised if he outruns his odds at probably a better price than what you got on him last time.
JK, you've been known to don your silver Bob Baffert wig and dance around after cashing nice bets on short-priced Baffert runners. Does Dabster fit the bill for you, or is it too early to tell?
It's a little early to tell. Here's what I'll tell you about these situations, and I have a similar point to this later in the card. When it comes to a horse like Dabster, that horse, for me to use that horse in a spot like this, he's going to need A- works, and I'm going to have to really believe that he's a freak. Otherwise, in a tournament setting like this, I'm going to take a chance that he misses the break. I'm going to take a chance that he wants to go longer. I'm going to take a chance that he's green. I mean, for crying out loud, American Pharaoh lost his debut, right? So I want to know that this horse is going to win before I waste a tournament play on him. And trust me, and especially later in the card, you'll see I'll use all chalk to finish a tournament. I'll use all chalk at any times. But when it comes to babies like this, I'm going to need them to be a little bit more of a sure thing. What I will say I think is interesting, this is not very good handicapping, but I find it interesting. These names are funny to me in this race. First of all, Dabster. You see who owns him? It's the Sheik. Like, what does the Sheik know about dabbing? Like, why? How did he come up with naming his horse Dabster? So I thought that was funny. And then my trivia is, do you get why Sayao is named Sayao?
Let's take a look at the breeding really quick, and we'll see if we can figure it out.
Maybe his brother? I don't know.
His
Supercharger.
His dam was
there you go.
Supercharger.
Supercharger. There you go.
Kind of cool. The dam of Kentucky Derby winner Super Saver and friend of the podcast Matt Bernier's favorite horse Cyrus Alexander. So
that's right. And of course, Junior Seau met a tragic end, but a very popular figure and a great football player. So for the Chargers for a long time.
For me, I'm going to roll with the outside horse, the Stone Street Horse. I clicked on Google to try to figure out how to pronounce this, but I figured Pete would bail me out.
I'm going to go with Eleutheros. Does your Google search suggest that I'm correct?
That's what the little MP3 that I clicked on sounded like. Here's the thing. I'm a little. I'm interested to see how Luis Contreras is going to be bet at Santa Anita. He's had his tack typically at Woodbine, and he's down here, and I've seen him on two Hollendorfer horses as I was flipping through it. Eleutheros' first race I thought was impressive, and it was impressive enough that it caught my attention. The second race was awful, but he was bet into 3-1 into a big-time Baffert horse and one of Baffert's kind of sneaky Derby prospects in Beach Bum. I thought he was against the track that day. He missed the break. He was rushed up. I spent time with one of our friends, Mike Maloney, yesterday, and he told me one of the trips he hates the most is missing the break, rushing up, and then not getting the lead. Mm-hmm. And that's the trip that this horse got. I'm hoping that he'll be forgotten a little bit on that, and I'm going to try to get that horse bet back on this spot. Now, here's the thing. If this horse's workout report comes back B+, the horse will be 3-1, drawn outside, adding blinkers. Then it's a little bit tricky. But if he can get ignored because Dabster's being bet, because the O'Neill's being bet, there's another Buzz horse being bet, then he's the type of horse that I'd like to lean on in this situation. I don't think I would use him on both entries, but there's a chance that I would. What I think I would do is use him on one entry and then use a horse like AP Zona, Sayao, Law Abiding Citizen that is getting positive workout information. If none of those,
let's skip over to the contest demo side here, JK, and we can show people how to make picks, and you can sort of talk people through how this works. It's a pretty straightforward interface. You see all the contest races listed up there at the top. We're in the third race. You've got 2 entries. The actual contest on Monday is 1 entry per player, but most every contest on DRF tournaments allows you to take 2 entries. So you're talking about a strategy. A race like this, you don't necessarily have one strong opinion, at least not from this far out. That's a good opportunity sometimes to cover multiple possibilities. I'm going to put your feet to the fire right here, JK. Who should we put in as your picks here? Why don't you make it for us?
So okay, let's pretend that the 11 horse Eleutheros or whatever is going to be 6-1. I'm going to use, if he's 6-1, I'll use him on both. I'm going to use him as an A horse. I'm going to use Dabster as a B horse. Now here's the thing about that, right? People always ask me what's my 2 entry strategy. Here's one thing to keep in mind. If you like the favorite, if you don't pick an alternate, you're going to get the favorite. So if Dabster's definitely going to be the favorite, then I'm not going to make him be my alternate. I'm going to pick another horse that interests me on one as an alternate, and I'm going to leave the other one blank. Pretty much saying that whoever is the post-time favorite is who I'm going to get. So that's one of the things you can kind of do strategy-wise to make sure that your second entry or your alternate entry is in the right spot. That doesn't come into play as much when you're playing a live, which this tournament is. It's a live one, meaning that you do not have to have all your picks in ahead of time. You can put them in as the game is going. minutes before posts. I wouldn't take it too close just to be safe that your video is not delayed or whatever. It's more important to select your alternates when you're playing in an all-in format, where you're going to put all your picks in, you're going to go to work, and you're going to watch it on your phone while you're supposed to be doing your TPS reports or whatever from whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. And it is important, your alternates, because a gate scratch, a late scratch, a surface change could come into play. So keep that in mind.
Just to underline a couple of key points Jonathan made there. The alternate pick, the 90% of the time more, isn't going to mean anything. That's just a pick that's going to come in if your horse is scratched after the tournament betting period closes. So probably it's not going to matter, but once in a while it does. And so it's always good to have both a primary pick, that's the one that's going to count in almost all instances, and a backup pick. Also want to underline
one more point, Pete, before you switch on that. Keep in mind, one of the greatest strategies you can do when it comes to your alternate picks is like in a place like New York, where you never know what's going to happen. You get your picks in early. If it's a turf race, make your number one selection a turf horse. Make your secondary selection the horse you would like if it came off the grass. I cannot tell you how many times I've selected some bum that's a turf horse in my second alternate pick, and then he gets scratched, and there's a horse that's wired 3 times on the dirt, and I don't have him because I didn't like him on the turf. You spread your love out a little bit in those regards.
I think that's a great idea. The other thing I want to underline is the difference between a live format contest and an all-in contest. Most of the feeders and credit builders and contests that new people are going to be playing in are all-in, meaning all the picks have to be in before the scheduled post time of the first race. This contest we're having on Monday, I wanted to demonstrate the fun of live contest play and the strategy that's involved when you can move picks around. And that's what this format is. That's what most of the bigger online tournaments are, where you can switch your picks around. The strategy's slightly different. Another webinar down the line, I'm sure we can do all about the differences between all-in strategy and live format strategy. But for today, we're just going to demonstrate Jonathan putting in his default picks for this live contest on Monday. And with that, I think we should move ahead to race number 4. JK, who do you like?
Real quick, I just wanted to note, I don't want to talk you off Eleftheros, but blinkers on a 2-year-old. Blinkers on for Hollendorfer, he's about 16%. Blinkers on for a 2-year-old, he's only 2 for 38 in the last 5 years. A number ran second and third, a lot of short prices that seemingly underperformed. So, because I was kind of thinking the same way, Jonathan, but the blinkers on made me kind of pause a little bit.
Now I get to now I can successfully dodge all of the Mike Hogan formulator money that's going to be coming in against him now. So maybe he will. I'll get the price I want on both entries. And to Pete's point about putting in your entries, your default picks, you don't have to put all your picks in ahead of time for a live tournament. You can put them in as you go. But Pete wrote a piece about it before. Of mistakes that I've made in those scenarios. You never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to call you, what's going to come up at work or family. I always, when I'm going through this for the first time, I put horses in because if the world comes to an end, I want to make sure that my entries are in. That's right, the world comes to an end. I still want to make sure that my entries are in. So I always put something in, and then you can always go back and change it, but have something there, in case your internet goes down or something like that. So that's just to kind of to Pete's point. And then moving on to race 4, this is a tricky spot, and this is the type of spot where I will typically use 2 horses. I have my good run at the NHC where I had 2 entries in the final table. One of the biggest things that people wanted to talk to me about is how I did it, and I got there because I played horses that I liked on both entries, but there's a time and a place for that. In a spot where I'm going to use some chalk later, I want to catch the price that comes in this place. And so I'm against Buy Me a Bond, although I have been on him strong all summer long at Del Mar, all fall at Del Mar. He loves Del Mar. He's a different horse at Del Mar. I don't really want him in this spot. The horses that I'm going to use are Champagne Charlie, who was bet down to was crazy bet on the day before the Breeders' Cup, and money that goes into that pool that can move a horse to that strong of a price is one that I'll definitely take a look at. He came back and ran fine at Del Mar, so I'm gonna push with him a little bit. If the price is too short, then I will get off and I'll go elsewhere. But I'm also interested in Mission Driven. We talked about this on the podcast a bunch of times. When Baffert goes east with a sprinter, they're not good enough to beat him. And although this one's not with Chad anymore, Chad had this one. And when Mission Driven comes west, adds blinkers, gets a new surface, a new program, a program that comes from the Todd Pletcher family of programs. That's one that catches my attention, and I think that horse has an unbelievable turn of foot that he'll love that firm going here. And if I can get a price on him as well, he's one that I'll use. Now, talking strategy, for whatever reason, if excuse me, if a horse like Champagne Charlie gets bet down to 2-1, and when they first flash, he's 2-1, I don't want him in this race at 2-1. What I would do then is I would move Mission Driven over to my main ticket, to my one ticket, and then I would find either another horse to use in that second spot, a horse like maybe Dynamic Scoring, a horse like Sir Seersucker, who should be a big price, maybe move them into that second spot, or this might be an opportunity where I could have Mission Driven on both. It just depends. The tote board will determine a lot of what I do in a live tournament, which gives you a lot more options. And like I said, an all-in tournament, I would just be using those two horses and hope that they don't get to a price that doesn't make me feel comfortable.
Anything to add here, handicapping-wise, Mike? I think we do want to pick up the pace.
Yep.
We've got about half an hour left, and we still have a bunch of races to cover.
The only thing I'll add is I really like Champagne Charlie as well. Part of that is, if you look, he was rallying against a horse that kind of got an easy trip, and who's now going to, we'll be seeing him a little later in the card in the Mathis brothers. I think Champagne Charlie's got a big shot.
I do like that idea, too, that Jonathon mentioned of even if the world is going to end, making sure you get those default picks in. I can see it now, Jonathon Kinchen sitting at the NHC final table with 9 cockroaches. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the next race here. Mike, why don't we start with a quick thought from you before we get to how Jonathon would approach this?
I don't have my notes on. I'm going to add my notes here because I've got notes on a couple of horses in this race. Again, you've got a number of first-time starters. I think that the board and the workout reports will kind of tell the story with some of those. Bob Baffert has a few. I'm looking at some of the ones that have run before. Number 8, Princess Julia, I think had a really tough trip when she was bet pretty heavily in her debut. Didn't change leads late. Maybe they've got that worked out. She's had a few works since. She's the daughter of Folklore, who was quite good. Maybe she gets a little overlooked in the second start off of what looks like somewhat of a dull debut if you don't watch the replay. Similarly, I like number 10, Moon Kitty. You'll see my note on her debut, another one that was bet very heavily. I actually like the move to the dirt with her, and I think she could improve off of that 6th place finish in the debut.
JK, who are you putting in for the default picks here?
Yeah, I mean, I would put in, look, like Mike said, this is a baby race going 5.5 with 2-year-olds. You got to see the workout report. If this race was at Gulfstream, like I said, I'd be logging in and checking out with Mike Welsh and those guys have to say. I got to know what they're doing. I can come up with great stats about firsters and siblings and all that stuff. What I'll say about the horses that have run is that the horse on the rail, Diamond the Center, if that horse has a good workout, a horse I could use. The rail is not the place you want to be at Los Al. We talked about that last week with California Chrome. That horse dueled down on the inside. I'd have no problem using that horse back. And then, like Mike said, Moon Kitty. The fact that Peter Miller started that horse going 5 on the turf, and what we talk about all the time on the podcast is being almost a quarter horse race. That horse has the speed to be forwardly placed in a 5.5 race against a bunch of horses with no experience. That's enough for me. I'm not into Princess Julia. I wasn't into her that day. I would imagine she'll take money with the connections, and I'll hope to try to beat her here.
I like it. Shall we go just show a little bit more of that functionality on the tournament side? Go ahead and put Jonathon's picks in. Very easy to change between races. You can see you can just hit on the I guess you call it a navigation bar up there at the top, and then once you're there, you put in the Pics, and then you move over to the right-hand side here and very easily can switch from the first entry to the second entry to put in the second set of Pics.
And what Mike just did was maybe subtle, and maybe people missed it, but on my first entry, he used the 10 horse. I'm sorry, on the first entry, he used the 1 horse as my primary, the 10 horse as my alternate. Look, if the 10 horse gate scratches, I don't want the post-time favorite. I want the horse that I like. So make sure you put in, even if you're splitting your picks with 2 entries, make sure you put in your secondary pick as a horse that you want and your alternate selection.
That's the way to navigate that. These subtle things once in a while can make the difference between making your contest goal and missing out. So you've got to pay attention to detail if you want to get the best out of your contest play. Let's now talk about the 6th race. We have the first of our graded stakes on the day. Jonathan, where'd you end up here?
The birth of my son, Kentucky Derby, I had a really good day, NHC, and the time that me and Pete got to go to the top of the hill to watch the race. It's my favorite race in North American racing and in the world when they run down the hill, and I'll be super excited when they do for the first time of the meet. This is a tricky spot. I am probably going to use Ohio on both entries. It's a horse that I was excited when he ran down the hill last time. Watch the replay of that. That was real trouble. The horse got steadied at the 8th pole, was making a little bit of run in between horses. He was kind of in a bad spot to start with, and then once he finally shifted out, he kind of got shut off by a horse from the outside and was never really allowed to kind of continue that momentum that he had already built up and just kind of finished evenly. They're running him down the hill again. They saved him since September. I think he's a talented horse. He'd shown that earlier in the year, and he's one that I definitely want back. You know, look, I'll say this. Don't fall for this trap. This is a very easy trap in tournaments to fall for. If Betty's Bambino is 6-1, she's not going to win. So don't fall for the trap of using her. If she's 5-2, you don't want to play her. I don't see any reason you ever play Betty's Bambino in a $2 win place tournament off of this situation. Yes, she's unbelievably talented. She loves the hill, but she's one that I wouldn't be using. Tough Sunday, drawn right inside of her is a tournament horse written all over. It's never been on the turf. It's got speed. It's da-da-da-da-da. That's one that I would use if I don't love the price I'm getting with Ohio. But if I love the price I'm getting with Ohio, I'll use him on both.
The handicapping point Jonathan making there, I think horse coming off a long layoff, that money is going to probably tell you as much, if not more, than any clocker report about how ready the horse is to compete today. Is that a good summation, Jonathan, of that angle?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes with first-time starters, though that can be deceiving, probably even more reliable with a good horse coming off a layoff, what that money can mean. It's a subtle art, and it can make you crazy sometimes trying to read the tote board, but I truly believe it does add some sense, if not nickels, to your overall horse player ROI at the end of the year. Mike Hogan, anything to add on the San Simeon?
I will. One of the things I love about Formulator is being able to use the filters to show all of the turf sprints at Santa Anita, which will hone in on those down-the-hill races. You'll see Betty's Bambino, of course, jumps out. That almost 2-year layoff is the huge concern, and I'm with Jonathan. You can't play him in the contest. You definitely want to pay attention if you're betting the race as far as verticals go, and you might want to at least defensively use in multis. A horse like Richard's Boy is one that I love. Loves the hill, has only been out of the exacta down the hill once, and that was when he broke from the rail, which is absolutely not the place that you want to be down the hill. His last race down the hill, he also broke from the rail in the shorter field, lost as the favorite. I think he has a chance. He's drawn well in the 8 post. He has a chance to turn the tables here. That's one of the things that form down the hill is one of the huge things I lean on in these kinds of races.
Sure, we've talked about that many times, and I think that's statistically borne out as well, that the runs over the course can be extremely helpful when you're looking at that European style downhill turf course at Santa Anita. Race 7 is back on the main track, and it's a Grade 1. This is the La Brea 3-year-old fillies going 7 furlongs. Mike Hogan, we'll start with you. Do you have a quick thought here?
Yeah, my quick thought, and I'll scroll through the field, you'll see there's a lot of horses with 1s and 2s early in their race calls, which tells me that there's going to be a ton of early speed in here, and there's not too many that normally rally from off the pace. So if the pace is as expected, I think it sets up very, very well for number 2, Lightstream, who's a nice graded stakes winning filly for Brian Lynch. Now at the end of her 3-year-old year, I think she's going to get the run of the race. I think she likes the distance. I'm just afraid she's going to be a little bit over bet.
What's your attitude about the La Brea, Jonathan, from a contest point of view? Are you looking to take one horse on both entries here, or are you looking to split them up?
Look, I know this is a contest webinar, but I cannot wait to bet an ice-cold exacta with Finley's Lucky Charm and Lightstream. I think Finley's Lucky Charm is a freak, and I think she's going to win this race regardless of the pace scenario. She is going to absolutely gut Enola Gray, who they've already said is going to go to the front. She's not the type of filly they want to rate anymore. They've switched her to Mike, and they're going to send her along. Finley's Lucky Charm is the real deal. Julian's going to grab Lightstream a little bit, and he's going to hold her back, and she's going to make one run, but she won't be good enough to catch Finley's Lucky Charm. I will use Finley's Lucky Charm on both entries unless Lightstream becomes a really attractive price. I don't think she will, though. I think she'll, like Mike said, people are going to see all the ones. They're going to lean on someone who they think will be finishing. She's the classiest one that will be finishing. And so, if Finley's Lucky Charm is 4-5 and Lightstream is 5-2, I'm not going to take Lightstream at 5-2. I'm going to take the free money, which is something that we can elaborate on. Is probably a good time to talk about it. Is I had refused to chase things because I don't want to take the most likely thing to happen at a shorter price. I cannot tell you how many times in my tournament playing career, if you want to call it that, I don't know if you can call it a career, it's only been 3 years, but those $4, those $3, they always make the difference. Look back at your worst beats, the ones that sting, the ones that wake you up in the middle of the night. You lost by $1, you lost by cents, you lost by $4, and if you would just take the shorty when you need to take the shorty, it would have got you home. And I don't let those things haunt me. Finley's Lucky Charm on both unless I can get a really nice price on Lightstream.
Sounds like in your cash betting a cold 3-2, and that's a great point, that attitude about favorites. I don't know too many contest players who can survive on taking all favorites, but when you're in that situation where you have a strong intuition something's going to happen, why not take that, especially in a big, full contest field? Actually, regardless of the size of contest field, really, when it's a big field, those extra dollars can help you because scores get bunched up, and we've seen instances where 80 cents become worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in a tournament like the NHC. And in a shorter field tournament, just having the lead is so valuable, those dollars can push you to that. So in either instance, I think it makes sense. I think the players who have that price threshold, I won't play anything less than 8-1, I think ultimately it limits them.
100%. One of the most underrated parts of it, it's not so much the end, right? Like not getting you that win, but putting you in front of someone that you might not have been in front of that picks the same horse as you in the last race, which is one of the worst feelings in the world when you're drawing dead. But if you can get yourself in front of that person, then when he picks the same horse as you in the last, or she, which is probably appropriate since our tour winner is likely to be a female, you don't want those situations to happen.
Tony Joe just crossed you off the Christmas card list there, JK. I hate to inform you. I think what it comes down to is that the old axiom tournament guru Paul Sherman is known for, play who you like. When you have that lead going into the later races of a tournament, it helps you be able to play who you like as opposed to being able to play who you need. Now, I'd never suggest forcing a play on a short-priced favorite. You've got to be able to be objective and be creative. But when that money's there, sort of lying on the table, you've got to pick it up. Now, other handicappers, they just have different styles. They look at the world differently, and they're drawn to long shots all the time. And for them, maybe it does make sense to have a bit of a price threshold in place. But for a player who has chalk has one of the clubs in his or her bag, the strategy Jonathon is suggesting right now is so critical. I can pretty much guarantee if you play tournaments for the whole year of 2017, a lot of the things Jonathon said in this webinar, but particularly that last one, that's going to make you some money at some point, and that's what we're here for. Let's move on to the Malibu. This is the brother race. 3-year-old Colts going 7, also a grade 1. Mike, why don't you start us off here?
Well, which Baffert do you like? He's got, what, 3 in here, 10 blessings, jazzy times.
The one that's not running. The one that's not running.
which one's? Oh, well, fair enough. He's got more spirit, and then sadly, Dre Fong had to scratch with a little bit of a fever. This is I think a wide open race, and I wouldn't be surprised if a horse like More Spirit, who's probably a little overlooked in the betting, one of these horses who was very good going longer earlier in the year, now cutting back to 7. I wouldn't be surprised if he runs well at potentially a pretty decent price. And one of the things that I always like with Baffert is these cutbacks on dirt and graded stakes. He wins at a very high rate, and the ROI is very, very good. He actually did this same thing with Shaking It Up in the Malibu 3 years ago, where he won at a big price. He was one of, I think, 3 Bafferts entered that year as well. Why can't lightning strike twice with More Spirit, huh?
I have a feeling we may have some agreement here. Jonathon, what do you think of this race?
This is one of those spots, we've talked about it before, is like, I love the Malibu. It's one of my favorite races ever. I remember watching the Twirling Candy win in a bathroom, and I don't remember where I was. I think I was in like Nebraska or something. I was at dinner. I ran out to watch Twirling Candy beat the track record. It's one of my favorite races, and every time I watch this race or I handicap the race, there's always that attractive horse that if the race was being run at Belmont or at Saratoga, is a horse that I would love. Like, that's More Spirit, right? Cut back, showed promise, blah, 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 blah. It just never seemed to get there in this race on this track. I've said it before.
Can you really call it a cutback if the race happened in May?
Well, I mean, I'm saying it's a cutback in terms of a cutback in style of what he's been doing. Yeah, it's not a fitness cutback, but it's a style cutback, right? It's not like
that's fair.
You know what I mean? And I'm gonna trademark that. I've never even said that before. That's great.
You generally don't think of More Spirit as a 7-furlong horse, I think, is your point.
Absolutely, right? So I just feel like he's a type that's going to be coming, but he's not one that I want. I think that the question is, and I didn't get a chance to look, and maybe Mike can do it while I'm talking, and I can give him a little bit of a cue where I'm going with this with Jorge Navarro. The horse is a freak sometimes. Like, I want to know if he's going to be a freak in California. And if he is, then he's going to be tough. Jazzy Times is interesting to me. I don't want him. I want 10 blessings. But Jazzy Times is one that I'd be aware of, right? Because Baffert he said it on Vic before. He said it leading up and after the King's Bishop, that he felt like that was his King's Bishop winner. And Dre Fong goes out, wins that race, comes back, and wins the Breeders' Cup Sprint. So there's something about Jazzy Times that got Baffert going. I just haven't seen it on the track, and maybe this is the spot that it comes out. I want 10 blessings in this spot. If I can get an encouraging Jorge Navarro stat in Southern California, he's one that I definitely wouldn't leave off. I don't care if it's a bad stat. I'm not going to leave it off. But that horse is pretty talented. The rest of them are not ones I want. Mind Your Biscuits was closing into a fast pace, going 6. It's a completely different situation. He'll be overbet off of that race, and I don't want him here.
So feet to the fire again, your contest picks.
Contest picks, I would go 10 blessings. And let's pretend I'm in trouble, right? Let's pretend that someone's jumped out to a big lead, and I'm feeling a little bit, what am I doing? I'm going to take the longest price of Jazzy Time, Sharp Azteca, and More Spirit. I would assume it's going to be More Spirit. I'll take More Spirit to actually get up for once in a situation where it doesn't look like he will. But you'll get paid if he does, and that's one that I'll use on my second entry. And I don't know if we want to talk about it now, Pete, or if you want to save it for later, but there's a dynamic when you're playing 2 entries in which your first entry becomes your second entry.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You're getting into the idea of sort of what's known as the good ticket, bad ticket theory, if I understand where you're going with this.
Right. So think about what we've done so far. You're picking your horses. You're picking horses on 1 entry and on the second entry, and you're whatever. I kind of call it the zigging and the zagging, right? It happens a lot. What happens sometimes is you have your kind of your A selections in that entry 1 column, your B selections in your entry 2 column, except for the event that you use the A horse on both. What happens sometimes is your B horse on your entry 2 will come in. Mm-hmm. Now that one actually has a score. Your entry 1 does not have a score. Now your entry 2 is your good ticket. So everything you were planning on playing on entry 1 now has to be played on entry 2 because that's the one that matters. So
at that point, you'll go through and switch things around in your future races, taking the picks that were on entry, let's call entry 1, the original A ticket. Now that's the B ticket, so you'll have to navigate between entry 1 and entry 2 and switch the picks around so that your basically entry 2 becomes the A ticket, becomes the good ticket by virtue of it now having points on it. So you want to flip-flop the horses you were playing on each one. Did I describe that to your satisfaction?
100%. And let my $10,000 advice find you that you do that immediately. Once your second entry becomes your good one, when they cross the wire and it goes official, switch them immediately. Don't think about it. Do it before you go to the restroom, before you grab some more guacamole or whatever it is you're doing. Do it immediately. I've got a $10,000 story somewhere on the DRF website that Pete wrote how that could go wrong.
Yes, at Keeneland, it was a Breeders' Cup betting challenge contest, and Jonathon steamed about something, took a walk, and didn't immediately switch the picks over, ended up losing a secondary tiebreaker in a dead heat for 5th. Had he made the switches he had originally planned to, the extra couple of dollars would have made the difference. Back to that other point from before as well. Definitely staying focused and organized during a live contest, very important. That's another one of the biggest differences. A lot of people have work responsibilities or family responsibilities throughout the afternoon. The all-in format is great. You do all the work. You're at no disadvantage. Just put those picks in and go about your day. Live your life. A live contest, some people will do that. They'll put in picks and they'll at that point go and do other things. But that's leaving you at a competitive disadvantage against somebody like Jonathon, who in every instance other than that one day at Keeneland is going to be obsessively managing that entry. And it's kind of fun to me. One of the things I like about live contests as opposed to all-in, not only do you get to see the prices, but you get to have that real fun of playing the game and the extra levels of strategy, particularly as we get down to the last races in a contest. Mike?
Yeah, I wanted to show one other thing. We of course don't have the workout reports yet, but one of the nice things I like in Formulator is the recent workouts. You'll notice the Jazzy Times had that bullet work last out. You can click on that and you can scroll through and see everybody else that was working that day. And since More Spirit got the exact same time at the exact same distance, I got to imagine that the two of them were working together. So, of course, they're running against each other. And you'll see actually the same distance. Dabster got the same time as a horse named Dre Dan. I actually looked him up. He was just shy of $1 million 2-year-old in training purchase, hasn't raced yet. So it's another little feature that I like about Formulator, especially prior to the workout reports. You can kind of get a sense of who horses we're working with.
The last race is our third stake of the day of the Grade 2 variety on the turf. Looks to me like a pretty excellent race to have as the anchor leg in a contest. Jonathon, how do you approach the final leg? Is it any different in terms of putting in your default picks than any of the first races in a contest?
Paul Sherman said it best, play who you like. I would just put in who I like as a default. I'm telling you right now, and we can be quick and get to questions. I love Conquest Enforcer. I cannot wait. I'm going to go. I'm going to bet the horse. I'm going to leave the Logan, and I'm going to go stand right down there by the winner's circle and wait for my friends at Luch Stables to wave me in to take the picture. I love this horse, and I would be really depressed if I was in a position playing this tournament where I couldn't play him to win. But I would be very happy if I was in a position where I could play someone else and know that if he wins, I'm protected. And we call it kind of the shield of the chalk, the protection of the chalk, which Pete can elaborate on. But I love Conquest Enforcer. I think that horse is special. They paid $750,000 for him at the Conquest, at the sale, at the Keeneland sale with the Conquest Dispersal. I think he was the most talented one of all of them, and I think he'll show something special for D'Amato out west.
Inside joke for regular podcast listeners. You know he's not trained by Mark Cassie anymore, right, JK?
Well played. Oh, I thought Baffert had him. Oh, Baffert doesn't. Oh, wait a second. I thought it was Richie Baltus.
Richie Baltus is going to ship him east. Back to that concept of the protection of the chalk. Basically, that idea is you have a lead such that that any horse under a certain price can't hurt you. For example, you're up $20. You basically have it would have anything under 6-1 is running for you. So you wouldn't want to pick any horse that was 6-1, 5-1, 9-2, etc., all the way down, because you're already going to win if that horse wins. Side note, the ultimate version of the protection of the chalk. I don't even know if you know this one, Jonathan. It's something I heard a while back that I've written about at some point. Do you know what a good-all is in handicapping contest terms?
I don't, but I got my notepad out. I'm taking notes.
A good-all is when you're so ahead in the last race of a contest that even a cap horse can't beat you. And it harkens back to his NHC victory when he won the whole thing.
You know what I would do? I would, in that situation, I would take a knee. I wouldn't even bet anything. I'd just take a knee and go to the locker room.
So we've got the Kinchen finishing with 2 entries in the top 10, and we've got the good-all. Mike Hogan, your thoughts on the finale at Santa Anita?
I think Jonathan may be right that Conquest Enforcer, at least based on what we've seen so far, is the best horse in the field, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to win this race in the first start for the new connections, and he's going to be really heavily bet here, right? I mean, he's going to be close to even money, I would think. I'd be interested in a horse like number 11, Tusk, coming off a long layoff for Graham Motion. I won't do the formulator, but you can pull up Graham Motion stats off of a layoff of 180 days or more in turf routes. He wins a lot. This is a horse who showed some talent earlier in the year, and now maybe he puts it all together. They sent him out early to work on the track. I think they had this one in mind. I think he could run well at a nice price.
All right, Mike. I don't see any questions on my monitor. Maybe they have to be passed through to me. Do you have anything there from the folks who've been viewing?
I've got them, and we'll start with the first one from Mark Boersma. It relates to, actually, the Mathis brothers would be a perfect race for it. He wants to know, how do you think the new turf will play in December? Still lightning fast, or would seasonal and weather changes potentially slow it down?
JK, I'll let you speak to that. It's certainly something that I would be interested in monitoring as a horse player, but I wouldn't necessarily expect much of a change.
I would assume it would slow down a little bit. Something you got to keep an eye on.
Right.
But the thing is at Santa Anita, being forwardly placed has always been an advantage. It's not the type of track you want to make up 12 lengths anyway. So it doesn't really change. Whatever the adjustment will be, I don't think it will be one that would impact too much of what you're doing. If you're deciding between a closer and a horse that's forwardly placed, I would pick the forwardly placed one. But yeah, it's definitely a watch and look situation.
All right, we have another question from Mark Taylor, who wants to know any specific strategies for handicapping maiden, claiming, and allowance company. Always seems less formful than the stakes, and they give Matt a hard time. You have any thoughts on that, JK? Aside from, you mentioned, of course, you like the workout reports.
Yeah, those are things that are important. I mean, for allowances are a little bit trickier, but what I'll say about maiden claiming races is I think horses that show, especially in Southern California, horses that show speed that are dropping are horses that I'd always consider using. For instance, a horse, you look at their running line, it's 1-1-4-7. essentially they were on the lead against maiden special weight, they fell apart and were beaten 10 lengths. That's the kind of horse that I want in a maiden claimer. We've talked about energy distribution before on the podcast. We talked about just pace setups in general, and I think that I want a horse who can show speed against other talented horses, but when it comes time for him to kind of reach into that jar of class, it just doesn't happen to be there. When he drops to a maiden claimer, that class won't be running at him, and he can stay on a little bit at sometimes what looks like a better price than you think you would get.
For me, it all comes down to pace, and the fact is that as important as pace is in all races, it seems to me like in maiden claimers, all the more so. You'll sometimes see them running earlier fractions than they will at a classier level. They'll finish a lot more slowly, but still nobody wants to pass. So looking for horses, if you can find hidden pace horses using pace figures, horses who are dropping, who are going to be able to command and control, for me, that's just a huge thing in those races.
Absolutely. And the other thing I'll note, and that's why I jump back to Mission Driven, who Jonathon liked in the fourth, is I like to look for what I call muddied form. The last effort, granted he ran third, but was well beaten in a low buyer on the dirt. It's the wrong surface. He gets back to the turf. His turf races are much, much better. A lot of people will focus in on that last effort and think, maybe he's gone off form a little bit, but that just ends up helping your price.
All right. Now, Mike, I do want to do a little housekeeping. We probably have time for one more quick question if you have one ready to go.
Yeah, we have one from Kevin Carpenter who says it's extremely informative and he took personal time to watch and he wanted to thank us, but he also had a question for you, Jonathon, about waiting in a contest like this, waiting until the final minutes to make your picks. He's new to tourneys and he's often got a 6-1 horse that gets bet down to 7-5 that he wouldn't play at that price. Any tips that you'd have for him on how to switch midstream based on the odds?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's kind of what we talked about earlier a few times during the show. Is if you have you've gone ahead and put in your the world's going to end picks early, and you're watching and you turn it on and they're walking into the paddock and the horse that you thought was going to be 6-1 is 7-5. There's a chance that you might need to switch that. Now you're in the lead. Take your take your 7-5 or whatever. But if you need to kind of make up more ground, let the 7-5 horse win. He's not going to hurt you. He's not going to have a bunch of people jump over you. And then take your horse that you think your second choice. It's 5-1. And that's one that you can kind of count on. His question reminded me of a situation I got into last year where there's nothing worse than, like Pete said, that last race, you need a 6-1 to win, and there's a horse that you want to play that's going from 5-1 to 6-1 to 7-1 to 5-1 to 6-1. So you have no clue where he's going to close at. And our buddy Ryan Flanders beat me in a tournament because I took a horse that I thought was going to win in a late click, knocked him down. The horse won, but it wasn't good enough to get me there.
My advice I'll give, and the original question I think was maybe pointing at this too, you're not going to be sure sometimes you're going to have to make a decision before you know the absolute what the last price is going to be. One place I'd say to look for clues is the multi-race pools. Very often you can just get a sense from looking at them, even if you don't do all the math on it, of what the final prices of a horse are going to be. You can certainly see if a horse is 4-1 and he's the favorite in all the multi-race pools, you know what? That horse is going to be coming in. That's probably not one. If you need a 4-1 shot to get your goal, that's not one you're going to be able to play there. So I think the multi-race wagers are an excellent place to look for clues about things like that as well. We are just about out of time. I do want to reiterate, to be eligible to play in this contest on Monday, you need to have a DRF Tournaments account. That's okay. You can create that easily enough. I would recommend for those watching live to do that in the next few hours. Those listening to the podcast who missed this opportunity, that's okay. There'll be others. Make sure you have your DRF Tournaments account. The other wrinkle is you need to have the email that is associated with your DRF Tournaments account be the one that you used to register for this webinar. Hopefully everybody has done that, and we're in good shape. Really look forward to seeing who's going to win these 10 entries, these 10 feeder entries on Monday, possibly starting their journey to winning their share of $2.5 million at this year's National Handicapping Championship. That is all the time we have. I want to thank Jonathon Kinchen. I want to thank Mike Hogan. I want to thank all of you for listening, especially those of you who took the time to join this webinar live. Personally, I really like this format. I think we might want to do something like this again soon. It is not our usual deal. Our usual deal is we're the DRF Players Podcast. We typically have shows on Tuesdays and Fridays. You can often see those live via the likes of Spreaker, occasionally Facebook Live, but you can always find them wherever you find your podcasts, iTunes and the like. We will be back on Tuesday at 11 with a very special 200th episode show. Until then, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.